Welcome back, guys. Today I thought I'd do a comparison between Linux Lite and Linux Mint. Now, Linux Mint is probably the gold standard of distributions that people gravitate to when they are thinking about making a switch from from Windows. They have basically three desktops available on their Ubuntu version, which is XFCE. I believe there's a Mate, and I believe there's a Cinnamon. I downloaded the XFCE version because I wanted to make a comparison with Linux Lite. Linux Lite uses XFCE. So I'm going to go through just a general discussion between the two, and then we will get into some more specific comparisons. Okay, so they both installed easily. They both use the same installer as most Ubuntu-based distributions, so I didn't really have any problems with the install. Now, Linux Lite, I believe, the last I checked, did not have a UEFI install option. That makes a difference to some people. It really does not to me. So I went with the legacy install on both. Now, I ran into a couple of issues. With Linux Lite, I was not able to update the distribution right out of the box. And the reason is because the repo, and I believe it was the Linux Lite repo, I'll show you some screenshots on that. The Linux Lite repo was not online. It would not connect, and so it would not do an update until I selected an alternate repo. So once I did that, it updated without a problem. Now, Linux Mint did not have that issue. It was configured with correct repos right out of the box, did the update with no problems. One of the issues that I had was with the printer. So if I go into, I made a screenshot, printer info. You see this screenshot up in the top right, it says missing printer driver, no printer driver for Brother MFC J870DW. That's my printer model. And then you can see the printer actually in the print settings, it was configured and it did function. Now, ironically, the same thing happened in Linux Lite. Same pop-ups, but again, the printer was configured. So it's really a non-issue, but I think it's because it was looking for a driver. It did not find the driver, so it configured it as a web printer. I do have the driver, and if I go ahead and install the printer using the driver that I have for that specific model, it will show up in the printer settings panel as a second printer. So it's really more of a glitch than anything else. So, and again, it did do it on both. Okay, so I basically used the same criteria to measure. I didn't really measure the aesthetics of the desktop. I didn't really take a look at what I thought of the desktop as a concrete measurement, because everybody's tastes vary. What you think is appealing to you aesthetically, I may not find appealing at all. So I'll show you both desktops. We're going to spend a little bit of time in each desktop, and then we'll take a look at the criteria that I used and also what the tail of the tape is. So Linux Mint, again, it's probably the gold standard. Whisker menu. It doesn't have a lot of what I consider to be homegrown or Linux Mint type accessories or utilities, but all the bases are covered. If I go into the settings panel, it's got all of the standard settings for XFCE. It does have firewall, it does have an option for backups. So everything's covered. I like Linux Mint. It's like, you know, if I equate it to an automobile, it's probably like a Honda. You just get in, turn the key, and it runs. I have a Toyota pickup truck that is 16 years old with 250,000 miles, and when I get in it, turn the key, it just runs. That's what Linux Mint is like. Everything runs. Now, it's telling me that I have an update of some type, so I'm going to go ahead and do the update. And basically it's a GDebi update. We will install it. And it handles all of the mechanics of your desktop, all the utilities, everything is taken care of. Linux Mint does an outstanding, exceptional job. So before we get into the nuts and bolts, before we get into the concrete comparisons, I'm going to jump over to Linux Lite, and we will take a look at the desktop as it appears immediately when booting after the install. Now this, Linux Mint, is what you would see. There's one desktop folder on the desktop for your home folder, and this is what it looks like. Plain and simple. So guys, I'll be right back, and I'll be in Linux Lite. Okay guys, here we are in Linux Lite 4.2. This is what you look at as soon as you boot up. So this is the default look of the desktop. Now, as I mentioned, Linux Lite has quite a bit of utilities that they have configured to help you in your day-to-day computing. Let's take a look. I've got some screenshots that I took. Now, this is the desktop with the whisker menu. Now, the whisker menu, the spacing of the categories seems to be a little bit wider than standard. Now, these are the utilities that they have configured. You can see there's Lite Auto Login, Lite Desktop. Now we're going to take a look at Lite Desktop in a moment. Lite Info, Lite Network Shares, Lite Software, Lite Sounds, Lite Sources. That's where I had to go to change the repos so that it would do an update. Lite System Report, Lite Tweaks, Lite Updates Notify, Lite Upgrade, Lite User Manager, Lite Welcome. So lots of nice utilities that they have configured for you that you won't find on other XFCE installs. There may be a comparative utility, but of course, because these are light utilities, you won't find the same ones. Now again, this is the desktop out of the box, which you were looking at. This is the menu that you would go into, desktop icons, so you can deselect certain desktop icons if you don't want to see them on your screen. We're going to go visit that in a moment. I haven't really tried that out yet. Lite drivers. Now, as you can see, all I had to do was click on the Broadcom and the NVIDIA, and it went through and did the driver install. And this is after, you can see it's using those two third-party drivers. you can see the NVIDIA along with my Broadcom networks, and everything worked fine. This all worked properly out of the box for Linux Mint also. Okay, so here's the log that I ran into a little problem with. Install updates error, could not fetch. It's telling me to go to the forums and ask for assistance. But then here it gave me a little bit more info on the log. Here, the repository linuxlite.os.com does not have a release file. So there were some issues with the repo, but again, I selected another repo and it did the update just fine. Here's the welcome screen that you see when you come into Linux Lite. Install updates, install drivers, set a restore point for your backup, language support, online support, a help manual. You can go to the forums. So you've got lots of options on the welcome screen to help you get going as quickly as possible. Now we're going to go take a look at the Mint, some of the screenshots that I have. This is the desktop that you saw a few moments ago. These are the drivers. Now this is before I installed NVIDIA and Broadcom. This is after I installed NVIDIA and Broadcom. That's NVIDIA 390 and my Broadcom Wi-Fi network, so you can see that installed properly. This is the welcome screen for Mint. You would have to go through. First steps basically give you the same as Linux Lite did. You know, update, install your drivers, but it's very comparable as far as the welcome screen and what it will do for you. And here's the whisker menu. It looks to me like the categories are a little closer together than the. But again, it's if I shrink it down, that's about as small as I can get. The whisker menu does look a little bit different. Everything seems to be magnified, and again, the spaces between. I tried to configure it. Let me see if I can. If I go to very small, and I go to very small here, let's see what that does. See, it's still a little bit, the icons changed, but not the spacing. So it must be a setting within Linux Lite that puts the spacing between the categories a little bit bigger. So, but that's no big deal. That's just an aesthetics thing. Everything functioned properly. Now let's take a look. I think I did a. Yeah. So here's what the actual comparison is. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so Linux Mint versus Linux Lite. Welcome screen, both have a functioning welcome screen with lots of information and lots of utilities. The desktop environment is XFCE on both. RAM usage out of the box was 541 megabytes on Mint, 540 on Linux Lite. The kernel out of the box was the 415.020 generic on Mint, and on Lite it was 415.38 generic. After update, they're both 415.39. NVIDIA driver has a GUI install along with Broadcom, and that worked fine. Codecs, if you come down here, you can see I installed Xubuntu restricted extras and Xubuntu restricted add-ons in both distros just to pull in additional codecs. Printer install was automatic. It did pick up my my printer as a web printer. Screen tearing, I was able to get rid of screen tearing with, I had to use forceful startup and my custom Compton configuration file. Now on Linux Lite, they use a different compositor. Linux Mint uses Compton. I'm not exactly sure what Linux Lite is using, but it's not Compton. But to Linux Lite's credit, I was able to eliminate screen tearing just by forcing full composition pipeline on NVIDIA. I didn't change any compositing. So that's a plus for Linux Lite. Linux Mint, even after forcing full composition pipeline, I had to install the custom Compton configuration file. But I did ultimately remove screen tearing from both. Easy update, Linux Mint, very easy. Linux Lite, I struggled a little bit at the beginning because it would not update due to some kind of a conflict with the Linux Lite repo. I selected another repo and it did the update. There is a user manual for both. Firefox 63.0 is the default browser for both distributions. They both have excellent community support, excellent forum, so I don't think you'd have any difficulty getting some problems resolved with help from the community. Now let's take a look at these desktop icons. I think I'm going to have to go to the standard and go to desktop, go to icons and uncheck removable devices. Let's arrange, and now let's see if I can get rid of those. We'll go back to Light Desktop, select the desktop icons you wish to enable or disable. You have to come down and disable all of them. So they've got them listed twice, as you can see. So guys, that is the comparison between Linux Lite and Linux Mint. Both excellent distributions. As with most Linux distributions, you'll have to tweak a little bit here or there, but both of them run absolutely fine, no problems at all. Based on this information, you can try them yourself, see how you like them, or if I had to make a recommendation of the two, I would have to go with Linux Mint, only because it is the gold standard. They have done lots of work. You'll probably have less issues out of the box, but I don't want to diminish Linux Lite. It is a terrific distribution. So guys, that is it for today's video. Thank you very much for stopping by the channel. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you soon. Take care.